Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're heading into a pretty mysterious area, the Vishapakar. These are the so-called dragon stones found in the Armenian highlands.
That's right. We've got some really interesting sources here, but the immediate takeaway is just how little we definitively know.
Exactly. Even though there are loads of them, what, over 150 known?
At least 150 documented, yeah. And you have to assume there were, or maybe still are, many more undiscovered. But their exact purpose, their origins, still quite murky.
A real ancient puzzle. So our mission today for you listening is to kind of pull out the key info, explore the connections, and just try to understand the world these stones came from.
Sounds good. Where should we start? Maybe with the basics. What are Vishapakar?
Yeah, let's do that. You mentioned the name means dragon stones or serpent stones.
Correct. Vishapakar is the Armenian term. Sometimes, in archaeology, they might just be called megaliths or menhirs, these standing stones.
And the big part of their story is where they're found, right?
Yeah.
These high-altitude locations.
Absolutely key. The texts emphasize they are mostly situated between 2,300 and 3,200 meters, so quite high up.
That's really high. What's the environment like there?
Well, crucially, they're almost always near water sources. Think natural ponds, maybe artificial ones too, definitely near high-altitude lakes.
Water seems vital then.
It does, and interestingly, the sources mention they're often in these sort of concave, bowl-like meadow spots, which means they aren't always immediately obvious from far away.
Huh. So not necessarily hilltop beacons, but tucked away slightly near water. That feels significant.
It does, doesn't it? It suggests a specific purpose tied to that exact kind of location.
And what do they physically look like if you stumble upon one?
Okay, so they're monolithic, carved from a single piece of stone, usually basalt.
One solid piece.
Yep. And the shape is pretty distinctive, often described as cigar-like, sort of elongated.
Okay.
And they frequently have carvings on them, typically fish heads or sometimes serpents or dragons, which ties back to the name.
Fish and serpents. And near water.
Exactly. Size varies quite a bit, too. Some are maybe 1.5 meters, so about human height, but others go up to 5.5 meters tall.
Wow. 5.5 meters is huge. That's a serious monument.
Definitely. These were significant undertakings.
So the fish, the serpents, the water locations, this points pretty strongly towards, well, water worship, doesn't it?
That's the main interpretation presented, yes.
Yeah.
The sources really stress this link between the Vishapakar and ancient water veneration in the Armenian highlands.
Any other evidence for that?
Well, it mentions they've been found near hot springs, too. And interestingly, some of those same hot springs later became Christian holy sites.
Ah, that's fascinating. So a continuity of sacredness associated with the water source.
Potentially, yeah. It hints at how powerful these locations were perceived to be across different belief systems.
Which brings us to what happened when Christianity arrived. You can't just ignore massive dragon stones, can you?
No, you really can't. And the sources say some were actually moved.
Moved. Where to?
To Christian sites like monasteries or churchyards, and then they were recarved.
Recarved.
Turned into Christian steel, those upright slabs. They carved biblical imagery, crosses, saints, that kind of thing, right over the older forms or alongside them.
Wow. So co-opting the old power. Or maybe just integrating it.
It's hard to say the exact motivation, but it certainly shows the stones held enduring significance. They weren't just destroyed, they were transformed, repurposed.
That really speaks volumes about their importance. Okay, so distribution, you said about 150 known.
Roughly 150 currently documented across the whole highland region. About 90 of those are within modern Armenia's borders.
And do they stand alone, or?
Mostly found in groups. It's rare to find just a single isolated Vishapakara. They tend to cluster.
Groups. Okay, so we've got these big grouped water-associated fish and serpent stones high up, some later Christianized. That gives us a good picture. But the sources go somewhere else too, don't they? Into language and spirituality.
Yes, this is where it gets really intriguing, moving beyond just the stones. There's this idea presented about the ancient Armenian alphabet.
Right, that it wasn't just for writing.
Exactly. The source suggests it was seen as much more than phonetic symbols. It talks about a complex mathematical structure within it.
Mathematical. How so?
It even mentions connections to chemical elements having specific numerical values linked to the letters.
Whoa, okay. Chemical elements. That's
Right.
unexpected.
It is. It suggests a worldview where language, math, maybe even the basic makeup of the universe were all deeply interconnected.
And something about the sounds of the letters.
Yeah, the source says each letter wasn't just one sound, like A is ah. It was a combination, like AYB for A, then for B, 3 sounds per letter.
AYB, Ben, and...
Okay. And the idea proposed is that reciting the whole alphabet, A, Y, B, Ben, Gim, etc., from start to finish, functioned as a mantra.
A mantra, like a sacred chant.
Kind of, yeah. Believed to be a way to channel divine energy. So the act of speaking the alphabet itself was considered powerful, maybe even transformative.
That's a completely different way of thinking about an alphabet. And how does this connect to chakras? The source mentioned that too.
It did. It looks at the Armenian word chakar, which apparently evolved into chakra.
Chakra. Okay.
And it breaks it down. CH supposedly had the numerical value 7. AK meant wheel. And AR, or RA.
Ra, like the Egyptian sun god.
Exactly that connection. AR, or RA, meaning god of sun. And this links to the etymology of Armenia itself, suggesting people of the sun god.
So putting together CHAKR, seven-wheel sun god.
Or something like 7 sun wheels, yeah. And the source frames the ancient Armenians' identity, potentially, as people with burning 7 sun wheels.
Wow, that is a powerful, potent self-image. Like innate spiritual energy centers connected to the sun.
It suggests a very specific, perhaps ancient understanding within that culture, linking their identity, their language, cosmology, and these energy concepts.
It really makes you wonder if the Vishapakar stones somehow physically represented or anchored these kinds of beliefs in the landscape.
That's the big question, isn't it? How did these abstract ideas relate to the physical monuments? The sources don't draw a direct line, but the proximity is suggestive.
And then there's a manuscript mentioned called The Vision.
Yes, described as a unique Armenian text detailing some kind of divine encounter.
What does it say?
One phrase highlighted is this idea that things need to be burnt to be able to learn.
Burnt to learn. What could that mean? Purification. Sacrifice.
It's cryptic, isn't it? The source doesn't explicitly link it to the stones, but it introduces this concept of transformation, maybe through intense experience or destruction, as a path to knowledge in their worldview.
Another layer of complex thought. And this manuscript depicts a very important place.
It does. It contains one of the earliest known depictions of the Mother Cathedral of Etchmiadzin.
Etchmiadzin. Isn't that traditionally considered the first church?
According to the vision of St. Gregory the Illuminator, who founded it, yes, seen as the site where Christ descended, marking the spot, the first temple in the world in that tradition.
A hugely significant site.
Absolutely. And the source throws in an interesting modern connection. It notes that George Gurdjieff, the 20th century spiritual teacher,
Gurdjieff.
yes, apparently visited and even lived there for a time, which suggests, a kind of enduring spiritual pull or resonance about the place.
That is quite a connection across time. Okay, one last piece from the sources. Something about writing conventions. Only capital letters.
Right. It points out that historically, ancient Armenian was written only in capitals. Even numbers were represented using these capital letters.
A little lowercase.
Apparently not initially. Which, again, might suggest that each letter form carried inherent weight or significance. It kind of reinforces that idea of the alphabet being more than just practical symbols.
Maybe lending more credence to the alphabet as mantra idea, if every character is inherently significant.
It could be interpreted that way, yeah. It suggests a different relationship with the written word than we typically have.
Okay, wow. So, just to recap for everyone listening, we started with these mysterious, massive stone monuments, the Vishapakar.
These dragon stones, high in the mountains, near water, often with fish or serpent carvings, clearly linked to water worship.
Some of which were later absorbed into Christian tradition, recarved, moved, showing their lasting power.
But then we explored these other dimensions, the ancient Armenian alphabet possibly being a mathematical code, a mantra.
Linked to chemical elements, even. And this concept of Shakar, the 7 sun wheels, connecting to identity and the sun god.
Plus the cryptic ideas from the Vision manuscript about burning to learn and its connection to the ancient sacred site of Etchmiadzin.
It paints a picture of a culture with potentially very deep interconnected beliefs about language, the cosmos, energy, and their place within it all.
Absolutely. We've gone from solid stone to some pretty profound, if speculative, cultural concepts. And the key thing, as we said at the start, is how much is still interpretation. The stones are silent witnesses, mostly.
They really are. Which leaves us, and you, with a final thought to chew on, doesn't it?
I think so.
Given everything we've touched on, the deliberate placement of these stones, the sophisticated symbolism potentially embedded in the ancient language itself, what else might be hidden there?
What other knowledge about how these people understood their world, their spirituality, their connection to the landscape might still be encoded in the Vishapakar or in other aspects of this ancient culture we haven't uncovered yet?
It really makes you wonder about the depth of understanding in these ancient highland communities and how all these pieces, stone, water, language, belief, might fit together. Something to ponder.
Definitely food for thought.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the truly enigmatic Vishapaka.